tonight is the advent of Gimel Tammuz. It's the third day of Tammuz. And Gimel Tammuz is the anniversary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's passing. And tonight is the 30th anniversary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's passing. And it's no exaggeration to say that the Rebbe was a monumental force in changing the landscape of the world, but particularly, I could say unequivocally, without any exaggeration, that this Torah class, would never have been if not for the Rebbe, and thousands of other Torah classes like it all over the world. And the reason for that is very simply, the Rebbe inspired and continues to inspire generations to transform the landscape of Jewish reality. And he did so with selfless devotion. And so when it comes to a day like today, the third day of Tammuz being tonight, and it's B'hashgacha Pratis that today we have, by divine providence, today we have a Torah class, literally a few hours away from the beginning of this commemoration. And it made me reflect, and I was reflecting on Shabbat, I was reflecting yesterday, I was reflecting this morning, that this class would never have been, more than that, I would have never been a teacher. I would have never been a teacher. In fact, last night I attended a gathering for Chabad community at the Russian Community Center. And my niece, a very gifted young woman, actually Yossi's sister's child, was brought in from California to lead a Fabrengen, to lead a Hasidic gathering where she spoke, shared inspirational stories, Divrei Torah, and also sang. And she has a beautiful voice, and she sang different nigunim. And the hostess of the Russian Community Center is my cousin. Hannah Sirota is one of my father's only cousins. My father's entire family was murdered in the Holocaust. But my father has this one cousin that came out of Russia much later on through great miracles of their own. And she said to me, I said to her, I enjoyed the Fabrengen so much. I really enjoyed the speaking. And she said to me, and I enjoyed listening to you speak. And I said, thank you. And then she said to me, Devorah, I'm always amazed. I'm just blown away to see that you are a speaker. She said, because I remember you as a child, you were extremely shy. And I said, I was. And she said, was it my imagination? She said, no, this is my father's cousin. She said, I remember your sister was like a ball of fire and very outgoing, but you were this very shy, quiet girl who kind of kept to herself. And I said, it's true. I did live with the world of ideas percolating in my head. I was always a very big reader, but I never saw myself as being a speaker or a teacher or someone that would go to the front of the room. I was someone who would like to sit in the back of the room and listen. And I was reflecting on what she told me when I was driving home. And I was thinking about it, how true it was that if not for the Rebbe, if not for his call to action and his inspiration to us that we should not allow our natural tendencies to be inhibitors of our inner strengths. When there is a call to wake up the Jewish world and to keep the Jewish world strong, and the Rebbe called on every single person, man, woman, and child, to reveal their inner strengths. And as Jonathan Sachs said about the Rebbe, he said that when he met the Rebbe, before he met the Rebbe, he was aware that the Rebbe had many followers. He said, but when he met the Rebbe, he realized that the Rebbe never wanted any followers. What the Rebbe wanted was to create leaders. And the Rebbe saw leadership in every single person, which was just a fascinating reality. So today is the 30th anniversary of the Rebbe's passing, tonight. And to me, first of all, I cannot believe that 30 years have gone by, because I remember when it happened, I was a young mother, and it seemed like an impossibility that we would be bereft such a strong leader. And so on the one hand, how much time has passed. On the other hand, the lens with which we see the impact the Rebbe has had and it continues to have on the Jewish world and beyond is a source of great comfort and inspiration. But when we look at it, we see that the Rebbe was really training all of us to be best that we could be. And in fact, on Shabbat, when we were reflecting on this in synagogue, I was thinking about how much more I must do if I'm going to be honest with myself, and if I would be able to speak to the Rebbe and say to the Rebbe, this is what I'm doing, this is what my community is doing. And I would know that the Rebbe would challenge me to say, but there's so much more you could do. And you can't rest on your laurels. And one of the reasons I feel that the continuity of this class is so strong is because of the Rebbe's directive that can't let an opportunity go to waste. And is this really an excuse not to have a class? Is this really an excuse not to get together? So you don't work in a paradigm of normative behavior. You work in a paradigm of changing the world. And when you're in a paradigm of changing the world, then vacations and time off and all these things become relative ideas that need to have their place, but they don't need to become the purpose. Often people literally will work a whole year so they can take their vacation. But truly, a vacation is just to give you a breathing space so that you can recharge to do your work. Not that you work in order to have your vacation, and people live from vacation to vacation. And so in the most inopportune times, I found myself asking, but there's no reason why I can't have a class today. It's going to be challenging, but I could still pull it off. I could still pull it off. And this is the conscience of the Rebbe, that the Rebbe drove into us this imperative, this restlessness of the imperative of now, and that not missing an opportunity, the power of the single moment, and the power of the smallest act. Because we often look at the troubles of the world, and we see the troubles of the world through a prism where it is far greater than what we can handle. We can only look at the troubles of the universe and shake our head and say, what is going on? And what can I, as a single human being, do about it? And the answer invariably is nothing. What can I do? I could do nothing. The world is moving at a pace or changing or behaving on a pace that is beyond anything that I can control. So what's the point? And the Rebbe really stressed the value of every single minute and the value of every single action. And the Rebbe said that the smallest of actions cannot be underestimated, because all of existence is the sum total of minutes, and all of change is a sum total of small actions. And so these were the two driving forces for this class. And so therefore, I feel like on the Rebbe's passing tonight, that yes, we will have a Torah class. And I found some beautiful teachings that by divine providence, I found just speak so much to what we are talking about today. But I do want to take a few moments just to pay tribute to God, really, for allowing a generation to have a leader in the aftermath of the Holocaust that would rise and raise the Jewish people up with hope, and also inspire the most impossible generation, a generation of American race kids that most people had written off. But the Rebbe saw opportunity in every movement. In fact, my mother told me that when she was a young woman, the previous generations, meaning her parents, looked askance at the hippie movement that was evolving in the 60s and the peace movement. And they saw it as just counter-revolutionary and breaking all barriers and breaking the ethos of the countries that they were in, the Western countries, primarily the United States. And the Rebbe said, no, what I see is disaffected youth that are spiritual seekers that have the greatest opportunity to bring good to this world. And so you would think that a black-hatted rabbi with a long black coat should have nothing in common with a hippie and would see a hippie as an anathema and a complete negation of everything that he, the conservative rabbi stands for. But instead, the Rebbe saw a generation looking for truth, looking for kindness. And the Rebbe said, this generation has the greatest opportunity to transform the world for good. And so when I think about the chaos that is happening in the world now, my own reaction is, what is happening to the world? It's almost overwhelming and depressing. It seems like it's spiraling out of control. And then I think about what the Rebbe taught us. Look for the opportunity. Look for the opportunity to inspire and to bring change. Clearly, the status quo doesn't work anymore. So if the status quo doesn't work anymore, what is it that's going to work? And maybe that is the greatest blessing of all, that the status quo doesn't work anymore. And so these are the reflections that I had last night and today. And tonight, starting already now, hundreds of thousands of people are going to be converging on the Rebbe's gravesite in New York to be there for a moment. They only allow you to be there for about 60 seconds because there's so many people that want to just be there and say a small prayer. And the idea is that everybody says on this day, I want to be attached to a tzaddik. I want to pay homage to a tzaddik that really has revolutionized the Jewish world. And more than that, has given a force of Jewish pride and yes, can-do attitude to a whole generation. And what I find personally on a personal level most astounding and almost miraculous is the next generation. I remember when the Rebbe passed away, I had two little children and I was pregnant with my third. I shared this on Shabbat in Chabad. And I remember when the Rebbe passed away, I remember thinking to myself, how do I raise up my children in a world without a Rebbe? Because Rebbe was such a guiding light. He was, first of all, a great advisor. He saw things through prescient eyes. He had clarity of vision. He had inner strength. And the Rebbe had optimism. The Rebbe was the most seriously optimistic person. Very serious about optimism. The Rebbe's nature was serious and very introspective. And the Rebbe's nature himself was also introverted. That was the Rebbe's personal nature. The Rebbe was a personal introvert, yet he pushed himself out of those boundaries because he understood that the community needed him. But the Rebbe was a serious optimist. And so I remember thinking to myself, how is it that I'm going to raise my children without the guidance of the Rebbe and without them having an example of what a righteous Jew looks like in the fullest extent of the word, meaning not just a person who is personally righteous and he does his prayers and he gives his tzedakah and he's a good person, but a person who is righteousness expands to the whole Jewish universe, secular, religious, or any other label, and beyond the Jewish universe to the non-Jewish world, that the Rebbe was concerned for every single person. There's an abundance of stories that non-Jews have shared about their encounters with the Rebbe. The Rebbe saw everyone created in the image of God, and he felt that the Jewish people had an imperative to be a light unto the nations. So this capacity to care and to be an example of selflessness, it was something that I felt, how am I going to raise children without this living example in my midst? And what I find astounding is that my children's generation have a more intrinsic connection to the Rebbe than even my generation. Because for our generation, the Rebbe was our teacher, he was our guide, and he was our Rebbe. But for my children's generation, the Rebbe is beyond a teacher and a guide. The Rebbe is a wealth of ideas. The Rebbe is a wealth of inspiration because, almost in a way, because they never knew him personally, their connection to his ideas are stronger than even mine because it's beyond, it goes beyond experience. It goes to the core of the idea. And I see my children having a boldness in their Judaism that I don't have, having a pride in their identity that I don't have, having a capacity to be out there and to have a joy in teaching other Jews and being creative in the way they reach other Jews that I don't have. And to me, that is the greatest sign of the Rebbe's greatness, because the Zohar says that tzaddikim are very great and they bring blessing to this world, but their greatness is only truly seen after their lifetime. And I remember this was the saying that everyone said when the Rebbe passed away. This was the verse from the Zohar that everyone was using to comfort themselves with. Well, a tzaddik is greater in his, after his passing than he is in his lifetime. And I remember thinking, it's a nice phrase, it's a nice pithy saying. What does it really mean? Where is my Rebbe that I can write a letter to? Where can I get guidance from? And then you see that the exponential growth of Jewish pride, spirituality, and creative ideas in how to reach the next generation is much stronger in the generation that follows me. Children who never saw the Rebbe and who never had an interaction with him. So to me, that is the greatest miracle of all, and the greatest proof of the Rebbe's success. And people often talk about the third day of Tammuz as a day of introspection. For me, it's a challenge. It's a day of a challenge. I know that the Rebbe lived his whole life for one thing, which was to make the world a better place. And he didn't have a day and he didn't have a night. He barely ate and he barely slept. And he was consumed with the welfare of every single person, no matter their background. And so there is a challenge to me on this day to take this forward. And I would like to also pass that challenge on to you. I think one of the things that I learned from the Rebbe was not to underestimate my own strengths. Because as I began this class, if not for the Rebbe, there wouldn't have been this class. I certainly wouldn't have been a teacher. I probably would have been a stay-at-home mom. Stay-at-home mom, taking care of my children. I love babies. I love children. And I would never have pushed myself out of my comfort zone to teach and to reach out to people and to try to lead in some way and help out in my capacity. And it's been a journey, but it's something that I know that when I have challenges to do something, let's say Shavuot or any kind of holiday, and there seems to be an impossibility in it, I go back to the Rebbe's teaching, which was everything can be done. Just work, shift the paradigm, reimagine what normative looks like, and you're going to break barriers. And so my hope on this Gimel Tammuz is that these barriers continue to be broken, that the Rebbe's teachings expand beyond the Jewish world to the non-Jewish world, that there will be a changing of hearts, because as I said so many times, and the Rebbe taught this to us, that it begins with the changing of hearts, that the world needs the Jewish people to teach the non-Jewish people the basic laws of what Judaism tells us, that is the responsibility of every citizen of this universe. And I hope that this will happen in its full measure very soon. So I wanted to share that with you before we begin our Torah class today, which is a Torah portion of Chukas. The Torah portion of Chukas is a very fascinating Torah portion. The name of the Torah portion itself, and we're going to get into the text of the Torah portion shortly, the name of the Torah portion itself, Chukas, is one of the three terminologies that is used for a mitzvah. As we mentioned often, there are three types of mitzvot that the Torah talks about. There's the mishpat, there's the edut, and there's the chok. The mishpat, of course, is the mitzvah of testimony. So the mitzvah that pays tribute to that which has happened vis-a-vis the universe and us, God and us, the history of the Jewish people, the creation of the world. So Shabbat is edut. It bears testimony to creation. Passover is edut, and so on and so forth. Then we have the mishpat. The mishpat covers the gamut of all the civil and criminal laws that we have in Jewish jurisprudence. And then finally we have the chok. The chok is that type of ritualistic law that for all intents and purposes really is above and beyond our understanding of why we have them. And we hold on to these laws with a certain faith that there is a reason and there's a purpose, and we don't necessarily understand the purpose, and yet we do it anyway. And so the Torah opens up with the word Zeh Chukas. This is the law, and it gives us the law of the Para Aduma. The Para Aduma, of course, was the red heifer. It was this unique cow that was slaughtered and then completely burned. And its ashes were used as part of a ritualistic, I guess, procedure to remove the status of Tamei Lamet, somebody who had come in contact with the dead. So in order to remove that status of someone who had to go to the temple, they had to wait 7 days, they had to go to the mikveh twice, and part of it was that they had these ashes sprinkled with water that the Kohen would throw on them. And what was so strange about this law was that it purified all those who received it, but it contaminated all those who were involved in its preparation and in its administration. So it was this double-edged sword. It kept contaminating, as it were. I'm using this word very loosely, as you know, but it kept putting these people in the status of Tamei Lamet, and then the ones who administered it became contaminated in the process, and so on and so forth. And there's so many explanations on this. One of them I would like to share very briefly, and it's not the point of our Torah class today, just the name of the parsha. One of them is this, that when we see how much Jewish law, Jewish ancient law and practice made us aware of this notion of separation from death. So a person who comes in contact with the dead cannot come to the temple to serve in the temple unless he goes through this ritual, meaning that there has to be this separation from death. And it's almost like an underlying truth about Judaism, that Judaism wants us to be so aware of the negativity of death, because the purpose of our world and the purpose of creation is to be alive and to change our world for the better. And so it's a fascinating chok, it's a fascinating law, a ritualistic law that we don't understand. And most of all the ritualistic laws have to do with this idea of mikveh, of tameh and tahar. And these are ideas that there is no good translation for those words in any other languages. It's a status of lacking, and it's a certain awareness. It's a hyper vigilance and an awareness of the difference and creating a daylight between that which is vital and alive and that which no longer has the vitality. Almost as if to say that the ultimate purpose is that we get to a place where everyone has eternal vitality. And that is part and parcel of our teaching, that the world will come to a place where longevity becomes something that is going to be part of nature beyond 120 years old, because the secret to vitality, as it were, will be unlocked. And that will be the manifestation of that, a world that is filled with blessing, when there are no more obstacles to vitality. And all of the injunctions in the Torah is to bring us closer to this vitality, and all of the injunctions against is to keep us far away from the lack of vitality. And so that's the name of the Torah portion of Chukas. So it's a mysterious Torah portion. And then, right after the Torah gives us the laws of the Para Aduma, we have something fascinating. We are studying the Torah. We are studying the book of Bamidbar. So the Bamidbar starts with the census, the way the Jewish people traveled. We have the little rebellions. We have the spies. We have these wonderfully potent narratives in the desert. And then we come to this Torah portion, and it tells us the law of the red heifer. And then immediately it segues into the death of Miriam. So the Torah goes from year 2 or year 3 in the desert and jumps to year 39 in the desert, which is strange. It jumps. And Rashi asks the question, Why is it that the Torah jumps from the law of the red heifer to the death of Miriam in the desert? And Rashi says that just as the red heifer brings vitality and repairs the sins for and flips and repairs for the sins and transgressions, so too does a tzaddik do so, and his death serves as a kapara, as a type of atonement for the Jewish people. What I found interesting is that this Rashi is found on the second reading, which means the Monday reading, which means today's reading, which tonight is Gimel Tammuz, and tonight is the night that we are going to commemorate passing of the Rebbe. And then Rashi's commentary today, and he quotes the Talmud that the passing of a tzaddik is a sign of atonement, and that's why so many people will celebrate the anniversary of the passing of a tzaddik, because by being attached to that tzaddik, we benefit from the good that he did or she did on this earth. And I found that the timing of this Rashi being today, the second reading, to be quite interesting, fascinating, and a bit of divine providence. But again, that's not the subject of our discussion today. What I would like to discuss today is a fascinating story, perplexing story that follows the death of Miriam. We know that in the merit of Miriam, our sages tell us there was water in the desert. There were three beautiful things that accompanied the Jewish people when they were traveling in the desert. It was the pillar by night. And we had the clouds of glory, and we had the water. The water came to us as a merit of Miriam. When Miriam died, the water stopped flowing, meaning that the Jewish people, while they were in the desert, always found water. And the rabbis attributed the fact that they always found water to the fact that Miriam was a righteous woman, and because of her being there, water was easily found. So when she dies, there's a crisis. What's the crisis? The crisis is there's no more water. So there's no water, and you're in the desert. That's not a joke. It's dangerous. So the people start crying to Moses, and they start saying to Moses their famous words: "Why did you bring us out to the desert to die? It would have been better for us to be in Egypt. What type of leader are you? What is this plan that you have for us? Give us water, or we're all going to die." And Moshe and Aaron both become overwhelmed by the task at hand, and the fact that the Jewish people are still saying, "Why did you take us out of Egypt?" so many years after they've gone out of Egypt. And God tells Moses, this is what you're going to do, and we're going to get into the text shortly. God says to Moses, you're going to speak to the rock, and when you speak to the rock, water will emerge from the rock. Okay, so Moses is very angry at the Jewish people, and he gathers them around. And this is what he says. And I would like to go straight into the text, because the text speaks for itself. Let me just find my text here. Okay, and I hope Zoom finds it. Zoom, are you with me? Yes. Okay. Okay. So first of all, again, this is the Torah reading of Chukas. The first two readings are regarding the red heifer. And then at the end of the second reading, we have the crisis with the water. So here is the crisis of the water. We see that Miriam dies, okay? And right after she dies, we're told that there is no water. There is no water. The congregation has the water. Vayikalu al Moshe al Aaron. They assemble against Moses and Aaron. Vayarev ha'am im Moshe. The nation quarreled with Moses. Vayomru lemor, and they said as follows: V'lu gavnu b'gva achenu lifnei Hashem. If only we had died with the death of our brothers before Hashem. Meaning, in the other times that there were plagues and there were different challenges that the Jewish people faced, people died. They said, we would be better off dead, Moses. Thank you for nothing. And they said, the Lama Haviesem es Kahal Hashem, why did you bring this holy congregation, this community of Hashem, of God, El Hamidbar Hazeh, to this desert, Lamusham, to die there, Anachnu Uvi'erenu, us and our livestock. Everyone is very thirsty. Why did you do this to us? Why did you bring us here to die? The Lama, and why? Helisunu Mitzrayim. Why have you taken us out of Egypt? Lahaviatanu, to bring us El Hamakim Hara Hazeh, to this evil place. V'lay Makim Zera, it's not a place of seeds. Ute'ena, or fig trees. The Geffen, and grapevines, Verimon, and pomegranate trees. It's not any of those things that the land of Israel is blessed with. The mayim ein lishtot, and there is no water to drink. And this causes Moses and Aaron to become overwhelmed. Moses and Aaron move away from the assembly. They go to the entrance of the tent of meeting. And what happens to them? Vayiplu al pneihem, they fall on their faces. Vayera kvayt Hashem aleihem, and God shows himself to them. So Moses and Aaron are in crisis. They don't know how to respond. From where should they get water? And the people are complaining not only about the water, but their entire existence in the desert. And so we have the third section. We move to the third section. And this is the response of Moses. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemor, God speaks to Moses and he says, Kach et hamata, take your stick, v'hakel es ha'eda ata v'aron achicha, and assemble the congregation, you and your brother, v'dibartem el hasela, and speak to the rock, le'einehem, in their presence, v'nasna meimav, so it will give forth its water, v'haitzaisa lahem mayim, and you shall bring forth water, min hasela, from the rock, v'hichkisa es ha'eda ve'es bi'erem, and you will give the congregation and their livestock to drink. So what happens? Vayikach Moshe es hamata. Moshe takes his stick, milifnei Hashem kasher tzivahu, from before God as he was commanded. So God tells him, take your stick and speak to the rock. And Moses does that. He takes his stick, he speaks to the rock. Vayukalu Moshe v'Aaron el kahal el pnei hasela. They gather the entire congregation in front of this big rock. And this is what Moses says to them. Vayomer lahem, and he says to them, Shimu na hamayrim, listen here, you rebels. Sorry, I'm just going to shut this off. Hamin hasela hazeh naitzi lachem mayim. Do you think, can we draw water for you from this rock? This is what he tells them. Listen here, rebels. And we're going to get to the Rashi soon. Vayare Moshe es yadai. Moshe lifts his hand. Vayaches hasela, and he hits the rock. Bimateu, with his stick. Hamayim, 2 times. Vayetzu mayim rabim, and an abundance of water gushed forth. Vatesh ha'eda uvi'aram, and everyone was able to drink. And what happens? Vayomer Hashem al Moshe vel Aaron. God says to Moses and to Aaron, Yan, Lahi mantem bi, because you did not believe in me. Lahakdisheni, to sanctify me, to sanctify my name. Le'ene b'nei Yisrael, in the eyes of the Jewish people. Lachein, therefore, Laita viu el eskahal hazeh, you will not be the ones to bring this people el haaretz asher nasata lahem, to the land that I will give them, that I will give them. And then God says, Hema me meriva, these waters will be called the waters of dispute. Asher ravu b'nei Yisrael es Hashem, that the Jewish people disputed with God. Vayikadesh bam, and he was sanctified through it. And that is the end of the narrative, and we're going to get into the commentaries in a second. So let's just recap. What happens here? People are crying for water. God says to Moses, take your stick and go to the rock, speak to the rock, and tell the rock, give water. And Moses takes his stick and he goes down to the rock and he brings the community around the rock and he says to the community, listen here, you rebellious people. Do you think I'm going to be able to draw water from this rock? And then he hits the rock twice and water comes out. And after everyone drinks their fill and the problem has received its solution, God says to Moses, Moses, you failed miserably. You and Aaron, you failed to sanctify my name in front of the Jewish people. And because of that, you are not going into the land of Israel, but you will also die with them in the desert. I told you to speak to the rock, and you hit the rock, and you could have created a miracle for them, but now what you did was it's perceived as just moving a boulder, so to show the water, and then also you call these people rebels. So there's a whole. This is probably a huge discussion in the Talmud, in the commentaries. What happened here? First of all, why does Moses not speak to the rock? Why does he hit the rock? And we see that in the previous times, there's another episode at the very beginning of the Jewish journey in the desert that God tells him to hit the rock. So the question is, why didn't he hit the rock? And the rabbis give all kinds of explanations, and they say as follows. One explanation that's given is that when Moses was told, when they had no water at the very beginning of their travels, God told Moses, hit the rock and the water will flow. And Moses hit the rock and the water flew. It came out. It flowed out. So the rabbis say Moses was very angry. And when you're angry, you get upset. And when you're upset, you sometimes do things that you're not fully in control of. And because the first time Moses was instructed to hit the rock, in his anger, when you're upset, sometimes you're not paying attention. So Moses was not paying attention and he hit the rock because his brain was almost like programmed to have hit the rock, because the first time they got water, it was through hitting the rock. And if you look at the verse, if you look at the Torah verse, you will see that God kind of set Moses up for this. Let's have a look again at the verse. You look at the pasuk. Let's go back to the original commandment here. God speaks to Moses, and what does he say to him? Take the staff. So Moses had a staff that he did miracles with. This was the staff that he hit the Nile with, that created the blood and the frogs and so on. So he says, take your staff and gather the community and speak to the rock. And then Moses does so. He takes his staff and the way God commands him to, and he gathers the people. So the question is, what was God doing over here? He was setting Moses up for failure. Hachasamata, take the staff. Take the staff and speak to the rock. If you want him to speak to the rock, why are you mixing him up and telling him to take his staff? Especially since the last time, the way he drew water was by hitting the rock with a staff, according to your commandment. So what was God doing to Moses? Why didn't he just say, go to the rock and speak to it? Why did he tell him, take your staff? So it's like he was setting him up. And so there are some opinions that say, Moses got very angry. He called the Jewish people rebels, and no Jewish leader should call the Jewish people rebels. And that is why, in his anger, he got mixed up and he hit the rock. And so there are commentaries that say, see the power of anger. But the inquiring mind is going to want to know. A man who led the people out of Egypt, who faithfully served for 40 years. And yes, in a moment of frustration, he makes a minor glitch and he hits the rock instead of speaking to it. And he's angry at the Jewish people for their complaints. Not that they complained about water. That wasn't Moses's cause for despair. That could be explained. They're thirsty, they complain, they go to their leader, give us water. But they started to extrapolate from it. Oh, we should have died in the desert. Oh, we should never have left Egypt. This is no good place to be. What did you do to us? The fact that they had to give a Megillah to their whole complaint. Side note, whenever we have an argument with someone, we need to address an issue that we feel we've been slighted, we wanted something, we expected a certain thing from someone, they didn't deliver for us, whether that's a customer service representative, or it's our spouse, or a good friend. It's always better to say what you need and not to give the whole Megillah, and it would have been better, which we do because we're upset, so we start bringing in the kitchen sink, which has nothing to do with the situation. So Moses was not upset that they were thirsty and that they were complaining, but why do you have to start tying it down to me? I took you to the desert to die. I saved you from Pharaoh. I'm taking you to the promised land. It's a process. Have patience. So Moses' frustration is very understandable. That's why he got upset. He was upset at the fact that they were tying it to all these ideas of self-defeating ideas. But that begs the question, why did God send Moses up? And why did Moses not speak to the rock? And I mentioned there are different commentaries, and one of them is because the last time Moses got water out of the rock, he hit it, so it was just a matter of force. But the real question is, why would God punish Moses so severely? What did he do already? Okay, he made a mistake. He made a mistake, but he did so much good. So for this, he doesn't go into the land of Israel. There's no explanations that are really satisfying. I found a beautiful teaching from the Rebbe. The Rebbe goes and he goes into the Rashi, and I'm going to share the Rashi with you now. And I'm going to share with you something that I found from the Rebbe, and I was thinking about it when I saw this teaching, that this teaching can only come from a Rebbe. And it also, by virtue of the fact that the Rebbe gives this teaching, it shines a light on the Rebbe's perspective and tells us also about who the Rebbe is. And so let me go into this Rashi, where Rashi discusses why God was so upset with Moses for not having spoken to the rock, but having struck the rock. So here we go. Where is the Rashi? Okay. Okay, here it is. When God tells Moses and Aaron, since you did not have faith in me and you didn't sanctify me, right? Therefore, you're not going into the lands of Israel. And Rashi talks about what was the sanctification that God desired from Moses? What was it where did Moses fail? How did he lack the sanctification? So Rashi says, likacheni, to sanctify me. What was? Rashi asked the question, what was the sin of Moses? What was this grievous sin? And Rashi says, she'ilu dibartem el hasela v'haiti. For had you spoken to the rock and it would have given forth water, hayisi mikudash le'ene ha'eda, I would have been sanctified in the eyes of the congregation. In other words, you would have created a supernatural event that they would have to say there's something miraculous going on. When you hit a rock, there could be a supposition that the water was always there and you just moved the rock to reveal the water. Ve'imrim, and they would have said, Masel hazeh, she'eno medaber ve'eno shameya, ve'eno tzarach parnasa. If this rock that cannot speak and cannot hear and does not need sustenance, a rock needs very little sustenance to grow. It's not a plant even. It's a choice of the most inanimate of objects that just exist by virtue of events, but it doesn't really need that much sustenance to exist. It needs no sustenance to exist. A rock, whether it receives water or not, will continue to be. Mikayim Dibure Shel Makayim follows the instruction of God Almighty, of the omnipresent. So God was saying to Moses, you could have shown the Jewish people that this rock that does not speak and does not hear and doesn't need any sustenance is nevertheless listening to God and giving forth water. How much more so us? How much more so us? How we could have been that we could have had that lesson that we should look at the rock and say, look, a rock that has no need for God, as it were, nevertheless listens to God. How much more so us who speak and hear and need God's blessing, how much more so should we listen to God? This is what Rashi says. And the Rebbe takes the words of Rashi and he turns it on its head. And he says as follows. Masela ze she'ena medaber ve'ena shemea ve'ena tzorech lefanasa mekayim dibur shel makayim. Rebbe takes these words from Rashi. If this rock, which neither speaks nor hears and does not require sustenance, fulfills the word of God, of the omnipresent, kal mechaymer anu, how much more so we should have fulfilled the word of the Almighty. The Rebbe takes this Rashi and he turns it on its head. And this is what the Rebbe says. Rashi says that Moses, he quotes the Medrash Haggadah, as you see here. Rashi quotes the Medrash Haggadah that says, had Moses spoken to the rock, he could have created such a Kiddush Hashem, he could have created such an awe in the eyes of the community, and he failed to do so. The Rebbe says, look at the words of Rashi. This rock that does not speak, that does not hear, that does not need any sustenance, listens to the word of God. How much more so should the Jewish people have listened to the word of God? And the Rebbe says as follows. If Moses figures to himself, this is a teaching from the Rebbe, if I will speak to the rock and water will flow from the rock, then this teaching that Rashi gives us from the rabbis, that a rock that neither can hear nor speak, it does not need any sustenance, follows the directive of God, how much more so the human being, this would have been a terrible incrimination of the Jewish people. In other words, look, an inanimate object of nature that has almost no need for God, as it were, fulfills the word of the Almighty. You, who have been given intelligence, who have been taken care of, who have been sustained by God for 40 years, you can't. So the Rebbe says, this beautiful teaching, the Rebbe says Moses did not want to malign the Jewish people for even a minute. And he knew that the speaking of the rock would create such a juxtaposition between the inanimate object that follows God and the human Jewish person who denies God, that it would have been an incrimination. The miracle would have created the greatest incrimination against the Jewish people, and they would have been punished for it. And so says the Rebbe, this is a teaching from the Rebbe. Moses said to himself, better that I minimize the miracle and I make it seem that I just hit the rock and water came forth, rather than the Jewish people be incriminated. Because Moses experienced on multiple occasions that when the Jewish people were doing things that were not okay, God said to Moses, these people are not be up to snuff. Maybe I should take you and your children, you who know how to listen to me, and create a new people from you, a new chosen people from you. And Moses didn't want that. Moses, first and foremost, above all else, above even being a servant of God, was the advocate for the Jewish people. And so says the Rebbe, Moses was really between a rock and a hard place. Meaning, if he would have followed the word of God, he would have created sanctification of God's name, but he would have destroyed the name of the Jewish people. By hitting the rock, he didn't sanctify God's name, but he minimized the fallout against the Jewish people. And so says the Rebbe, this is what a Jewish leader does. A Jewish leader puts their own spiritual greatness aside for the defense of the Jewish people. This is the hallmark, says the Rebbe, of a Jewish leader. And I found this teaching to be so sharp because it's really unique. Everywhere else, you see people, all kinds of commentaries saying, well, Moses made a mistake, Moses made a mistake, Moses made a mistake. And the Rebbe brings proof that Moses didn't even make a mistake, and God set him up for this defense of the Jewish people because God actually told him, take your stick. And God was giving him the opportunity to do something incredible, almost as it were, minimize his own greatness as a leader, as a miracle worker, in order to spare the reputation and to avoid a juxtaposition between the rock and the Jewish person, the rock and the Jewish people, this rebellious people. And so Moses does is he puts the Jewish people above himself, and he pays the price of not going into the land of Israel for it, but he prefers that he himself does not go into the land of Israel, but that the Jewish people do go into the land of Israel. This is the teaching of the Rebbe, whose yahrzeit is tonight. I found it to be profoundly, profoundly powerful. And then it actually jives. Like, sometimes we have these teachings, these mystical teachings that come to us from the Rebbes, that we say it's a beautiful idea, it's a beautiful exegesis, it's a beautiful extrapolation. But now we're going to go back and see that there was another time that Moses behaved in this fashion, and that he was lauded for this. And what was that? When Moses came down the mountain with the 10 Commandments, we know that Moses saw the Jewish people worshiping the golden calf. So in the movie Exodus, Charles Heston throws down the 10 Commandments. But in the Jewish commentaries, he doesn't throw it down, he drops it. He drops it out of sadness. But the Talmud says, the Talmud that Rashi quotes, and I'll show you the quote actually, in the very last verse in the Torah, the closing of the entire Torah. So when we get to the last verse in the last chapter of the entire Torah, when we get to the Torah portion of Zot HaBracha, and we come to the last words of the Torah, and I'll share that with you if I can find it here. So we're literally talking about the closing words of the Torah. In the last words of the last, literally closing words of the Torah, this is the final verse of the Torah. L'chol hayad hachazaka l'chol hamora hagadol asher asa Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael, and all the strong hand and all the great awe which Moses performed before the eyes of all of Israel. So it's talking about Moses' greatness. And the last words of the Torah are le'enei kol Yisrael, in front of the eyes of all of the Jewish people. Rashi says, what was it that was the greatest moment? What was it that was the greatest moment that Moses experienced in his leadership as a Jewish leader? Rashi says, le'enei kol Yisrael, what was the moment, the greatest moment that Moses experienced? Shenis'u libay lishbar haluchas le'neihem. When this expression alludes, Rashi says, before the eyes of Israel, the last 3 words of the Torah, before the eyes of Israel, this expression alludes to the incident where his heart stirred up him to smash the tablets before their eyes. As it says, I shattered them before your eyes. And then comes the fascinating teaching that comes to us from Sifri, that the Talmud also quotes, the schema das HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'dasei, and God approved of it. God approved of what he did. Shenemar, like it says, asher shibarta, that you have broken. Rashi quotes the Talmud in Shabbos that says, Yishar Korach Sheshibarta, congratulations, well done for breaking them. Good on you for breaking them. Good on you for breaking them. And we have this, let me see if I have do I have the, no, this is not, I don't have it here. I closed it by accident, but I have the,
you want to go?
Yeah, I have this, it's in the Gemara Shabbos that God said to Moses, congratulations for breaking the tablets. And our sages explain why. Why was this a good thing that Moses did? Why did Moses break the tablets? So yes, in the story, it's because he was overcome with anger. That's the plain meaning of the verse. And seemingly here, at the waters of Meribah, at these troubled waters, it seems that Moses was also angry. That is the plain meaning of the verse. But Rashi alludes to the fact that in the Jewish tradition is that Moses was lauded for breaking the tablets, and God said to Moses, Yasher kachacha, as the Talmud in Shabbos tells us, and the reason for this was this follows. Moses said, the Jewish people just promised through hearing the 10 Commandments, I am God your God. You shall have no other gods before me, etc., etc. While he was holding the tablets inscribed the terms and conditions of their peoplehood. It was as if Moses was carrying, says the Talmud, he was carrying the marriage contract. And here they were having an affair. So what Moses did was he broke the tablets so that he could say, we weren't really married. We had some kind of an agreement. The tablets was the contract. So I tore the contract so that you should not be liable for violation of the contract. So this is what the rabbis say, that when the greatest moment of Moses, and with this Rashi closes the entire Torah, was that Moses broke the tablets. That was his greatest moment. Why? Because it was the greatest defense that he perpetrated on behalf of the Jewish people, which was, hold on, we have a contract here. The Jewish people are in violation of a contract. Let's break the contract to lessen the violation of the Jewish people. And here, says the Rebbe, the same was true. Moses could have spoken to the rock, but that would have been a terrible juxtaposition between a simple rock that follows the will of God and a people that doesn't. And so he hit the rock, and then the rest, it was history. The people got their water. Moses was punished. Moses said, better me than them. And the Rebbe says, this is the hallmark of a Jewish leader. The hallmark of a Jewish leader puts his spirituality aside for the physical benefit of his people. And that is the epitome and the description of what a Rebbe is and what a tzaddik is. And I thought, wow, how apropos that I chance upon this teaching on this day, on this night that commemorates the 30th anniversary of the Rebbe's passing. And there's something that I want to share with you as an addendum, that there's a song in Chabad. It's a very lively song. And the song goes, Al hasela hachach vayotze mayim. On the rock he hit, and water came out. And I remember as a child thinking, why do they sing this song in Chabad with so much joy? So there are people who say, well, it's not referring to the second hitting, where Moses made a mistake by hitting the rock. It's referring to the first hitting. The first hitting that Moses was instructed to hit. But the Hasidic commentators say no. This very joyous song, is sung Ala Sela Hachach Vayetze Mayim, that this verse is sung as a joyous song because it shows the epitome of the love of a leader, that he is ready to hit the rock and pay the price rather than have them pay the price. And so this song is sung with a lot of joy and gusto. And then there's a deeper meaning, which is that when you hit a rock represents all that is negative, all that is hard, all that is not transparent in the world, because a rock is so heavy and seemingly lifeless, and and you cannot see through it. So there's no divinity apparent in a rock. And yet Moses, his job was to hit the rock, hit the harshness, hit the lack of transparency rather, hit the obtuseness of denial of good in this world. And guess what comes out? Water, which is sweet. And the Torah is called Mayim Chaim, the source of life. And as of course we know as Jews, we say about water that water is a living water, and that we live for life, and we say l'chaim. And so what Moses did was he shattered the evil, the negativity, to reveal the softness and the goodness and the transparency beneath it. And it always touched me that this song is a song that was sang with great gusto in Chabad. And so I would like to close this class with a couple of things. One, I would like to share with you a picture of myself receiving $1 by the Rebbe. And this was not a regular dollar. As you know, that the Rebbe used to give in the later years of his life when he wanted to have the opportunity to meet people. But his schedule did not allow him to meet people regularly because thousands of people wanted to see him. He would give dollars out so that people should give $1 to charity. So basically the Rebbe said, I'm making you my designated shaliach to give this $1 for charity. And then you would take that $1 and you would give it to charity. Well, most people they did was they kept the $1 that the Rebbe gave them and they switched it for another $1 which they gave to charity. And I think the Rebbe wanted to change the paradigm of charity because Jews always thought of coins as charity, and the Rebbe wanted people to start giving dollars to charity. And indeed, I mentioned this once that Sunday, literally all the beggars of New York City would come and stand by the sidewalk when people came out of 770 because they knew that every Jew there had to give $1 to charity, and they would make it. They would come in taxis. They were able to afford their taxis, but it changed the paradigm. And I remember once walking down Kingston Avenue, the main drag in New York, Brooklyn, and there was a beggar, and he said tzedakah, tzedakah, and I had some change in my pocket. I gave him some change and he threw it at me. He said, no, $1 and nothing less. I said, I don't have $1 on me, but I would give you one if I did. The Rebbe taught us to give $1, but also the Rebbe said that when two Jews meet, a third should benefit. And so that was the idea of dollars. So sometimes this would happen right outside the Rebbe's office, but sometimes the Rebbe would give special readings. They say he would give little pamphlets for people to study, and he would give $1. It would be a special occasion, and that would happen in the synagogue, in the men's section of the synagogue. So this was my dollar moment. I had many, not many, because my father told me not to go too often to the Rebbe, not to bother the Rebbe. But this is the dollar that I received from the Rebbe. I want to share this with you for a few reasons. So number one, I find this picture to be iconic on so many levels. You see, this is the men's section of 770, and all the women would get dollars, and the Rebbe would give dollars to men and to women. And what they would do is they would alternate men for a while, and then women for a while, men for a while, and women for a while. And the Rebbe would look you in the eye and give you this $1. So behind me is a bunch of women, and you see on the side there's the men who are going to go a little later, or go next, or whatever it was. That this is, to me, this epitomizes how the Rebbe understood and venerated really the Jewish woman. And the Rebbe felt that the future of Jewish life and the future of Jewish education was very largely dependent on Jewish women being inspired. And so the Rebbe consistently spoke to the Jewish woman for her specific role in the continuity of the tradition, both within her family and within her community, according to Jewish law, not breaking the structure of Jewish law, but honoring that and this is something that I treasure, because to me this really epitomizes. And you see how the Rebbe is looking at me, and the Rebbe looked at every person, and that's something that I really treasure. This beautiful picture. I have many, but this one is unique because it's in 770 itself. It's in the Rebbe Shul. And then I want to share with you, following this, being that tonight is Gimel Tammuz, I want to share with you a clip of a Farbrengen where the Rebbe would, before he would teach a Hasidic discourse, they would sing a song of contemplation. How old am I in the picture? So I'm married. I see I'm wearing a shaitel. I'm married. I'm probably married for a year, so I'm probably 21 or 22 in that picture. I imagine I probably 21 or 22. Yep. Most likely 22. Yeah, in that picture. But it's it's to me that's what it was all about. The Rebbe spoke to the woman about her unique role, and it's not an accident that Chabad rabbis are so successful in their leadership. It's because the woman who he is married to is equally as inspired in the mission, and she doesn't come along for the ride. It's her mission as well, and her mission is to have the feminine aspect of it, to relate in a feminine fashion, in her own way, in her own style, in a way that impacts also very much the women. So women understand women more than a man understands woman. So this is part of that. Part of that is that that understanding and the honor that the Rebbe gave both to his wife and to his mother and to all Jewish women. The Rebbe understood very, very much and honored very much the self-sacrifice. And the Rebbe understood that just because the woman was not in the forefront of the procedures and of the events, that she was not valued, God forbid. But more than that, the Rebbe would say to all the Jewish women, put yourself out of your comfort zone. I know there's a woman in I heard this woman from England, and she spoke about the fact that the Rebbe would encourage women to reach out to other women. She was extremely shy, and she found it very un-British to like approach someone else and to like ask them, would you like to light Shabbos candles, or would you like to learn Torah? She just found that it went against all her British sensibilities. And the Rebbe encouraged her. The Rebbe said, "But you just do it, and you'll overcome your shyness." And she said that she was blown away by the fact that she, this very proper British woman, was doing these things. But but she said it had tremendous impact on the people that she met, perhaps because it was so unconventional. And that was just part and parcel of, I think, the Rebbe's impact was his recognition and his teachings constantly, that the Rebbe says that the faith of the Jewish woman is going to herald the redemption. It will be the strength of the Jewish woman that will see the Jewish people out of the exile, that in every generation it was the Jewish woman. And so this is a message that the Rebbe really imparted over and over and over again. And I was just very blessed. So I wanted to share with you a short clip of what we call the Nigun Hachana, which is, there was two songs that the Rebbe would have the community sing with him before he would go into one part of his Farbrengen where he would teach deep Hasidic ideas. And you could see there's a certain genuine spiritual work that is happening, that I remember as a child not understanding what the Rebbe was saying, going to the synagogue in 770 when my parents would come to New York, and just wanting to see this nigun, because for me that's where it was at that when I was younger. It was just seeing the nigun, seeing the singing, because the singing was in of itself some type of spiritual contemplation, a yearning for truth, a yearning to connect to the reality of this universe. And that I want to share with you. And let me just make sure that I have my screen set up here, because as I mentioned, okay, so let me just share the sound here. Okay, here we go. Let me make this. This song is called Nigun Hakana. It would be the preparatory song to the next song, which was to get everyone in the mood of studying these deep ideas in Hasidut. Okay, so just a minute of the song. I see my father in the center of the screen here, right here. Okay, so after this niggin, where we get everyone into the into the spirit of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe would sing something called the niggin of the four stanzas. Okay, and this is considered to be like a holy song by the Rebbe's Farbrengens. The Rebbe would be preparing himself now to teach a very deep concept in Hasidic thought. So just want to just shut this off in my background. So let me just shut this off. This song that we just heard is called the Niggin of Arba Bavas, and it was always sung before the Rebbe would give a talk, a spiritual talk that would be a very deep and complex talk. And these songs were a kind of a mental and emotional preparation for that moment. And this song, the last one, it was composed by the first Rebbe of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, who wrote the Tanya, and it's a song of longing of the soul, where the soul gets more and more invested in the desire to connect. And this song in the Chabad tradition was only sung on two occasions. When the Rebbe would give a discourse, a very deep discourse as a preparation for it, and then it would be also sung at a wedding when the bride and when the bridegroom is brought to the when the chatan is brought to the kala and under the chuppah. And so for myself, whenever I hear the song, it evokes a tremendous amount of emotion in me, because I am transported back to this sense of this connection, to this desire to connect to something higher, to connect to the purpose of our creation, to connect to the purpose of our life here on earth, to connect to the purpose of the Jewish people, to connect to the purpose of all of that is, and to uncover it, and to be one with it, and to be at peace with it, and to fulfill it. And this was something that I experienced as a teenager, but it leaves and it left an indelible mark on me, so that when I hear this song sung, and I will not listen to the song on any occasion as per Chabad custom. And so it evokes my children's weddings, it evokes my own wedding, and evokes these moments of connection. We were very blessed to receive, after these songs of preparation, deep teachings in Hasidic philosophy that touched on what I was talking about before, the whole purpose of our existence on earth, and the purpose of the Jewish people, and the joy that is found in uncovering that truth and in the unity of it all. And so that really that's what tonight is about for me, myself. It's about going back to what matters, and going back to the truth. And there is something about a tzaddik, when a person lives their life, and their life is devoid of ego, and their life is devoid of sense of self. You could see in the video that I showed, it happens to be the one that I chose, that the Rebbe is suffering from a bad cough, and you see that this doesn't stop him from performing, because the Rebbe didn't make it about himself. It was not about him, and he gave us the example of what it means to live not only for yourself, and that to put in perspective the world, and what the elements of our life, what should take priority. And the Rebbe showed us by example. So on this holy night, tonight, on this very special day, it's going to be a time of introspection, to reflect on the purpose of our lives, and how are we connected to our Creator, and what can we do, each and every one of us, what can we do to connect that much better to the source of all life, which is the Torah, which is the mitzvot, which is our purpose here on earth as Jews, and to invigorate it more, so that if we do a mitzvah that we can improve it just a little bit more, and we should go for it. Or if it's a mitzvah that we don't yet do, or we do it not properly, that we can do it better, and just take it on in honor of the Rebbe. Because as I open up this class, that this class would not be without, I would not be a teacher without the Rebbe. There would be no Chabad in Westmount, and there would be no class. So I thank you for allowing me to share with you what this day means to me, and I hope that you are inspired as well. Because I'll finish off with this story, and I know we're way past our time, that left a very strong imprint on me, which is this: that there was a New York City councilman that had visited the Rebbe in the 1980s. And when at one point he had not been as the Rebbe, he had not visited with the Rebbe for about 20 years. And when he came to the Rebbe remembered him, and the Rebbe asked him about their conversation, if he had followed through. I don't remember exactly the words of what their interaction was about. And this official was blown away. He was flabbergasted. He couldn't believe that the Rebbe remembered their conversation to the extent that he did. For him, it was a meeting of a great rabbi, but for the Rebbe, he had met thousands and thousands, and the Rebbe remembered with precision their conversation. And this is not about lauding the Rebbe's memory. There's many great people on this earth that have wonderful memories. It was that the Rebbe cared enough to remember a conversation with a specific individual. And so he was blown away. And he said to the Rebbe, "Rebbe, you're amazing. You're amazing to remember all these years later and to care. to remember all these years later about the conversation that we had to the T. And the Rebbe smiled at him. And the Rebbe said, and what benefit is it to me or to anyone that I am amazing? If you will galvanize your moments right now into doing something on behalf of, and I forgot what the Rebbe wanted them to do, something with the New York public school educational system, believe it or not. Then we will know that this meeting had some kind of impact. And that's the words that kind of resonate in my head of what benefit, says the Rebbe, is it that I'm amazing? And I know that the Rebbe would eschew any type of tribute given to him. And there are many tributes being done all over the world. I know that the Rebbe would eschew it because the Rebbe would say, but what is the point of this tribute? If you're going to be galvanized to do something good as a result of that, good. Otherwise, I don't need the accolades. That's not why that was not my purpose. So that's something that I'm thinking about, and I want to pass it on to you, each and every one of us. If we can take upon a mitzvah that we do, if it's going to the mikvah or lighting Shabbat candles, or improving in our kashrut, or in our relationships, whatever it is, we all know the mitzvot that we have to fix a little bit. If we can improve on that as a result of my sharing what I shared, the impressions of the Rebbe, then the Rebbe continues to inspire, and we give life to the Rebbe, and we give honor to Rebbe, and that is the only way he wanted to be honored and remembered. And so 30 in the Jewish number, the Mishnah tells us that the number of 30 is strength. So let this year be a year of strength, of Jewish pride, resilience, observance, connection between us and God and between us and each other. And may God bless us with everything that we require spiritually, physically, in our family, in our personal lives, in our communities, and of course, for Israel, for the safety and the security of the people of the land of Israel, and for Jews worldwide, and for the return of the hostages, and for the safety and the security of the soldiers of Israel, and for the wisdom and the courage for the leaders of Israel. So I wish everyone a blessed day, a blessed week. I hope that these words will do something. I would greatly appreciate if you can think about it and perhaps share next week something that you have decided to do. And if you feel too shy to share it, that's fine too. We all have our work that we have to do. But if we can all galvanize and use the inspiration that the Rebbe provides through his teachings, and that through his emissaries who are inspired by the fact that the Rebbe wants us to change the world, that we can do something, that we will continue that chain of goodness and the optimism and the blessings. And may those blessings continue to roll until we see the divine blessings for the entire world, and world peace, and the end of violence, and the end of suffering, and the end of all evil. May it be today. Amen.